Welcome back to the Verdict Zone. This is the story of a daughter's systematic pursuit of peace, forced to confront a mother who believed her own unresolved trauma gave her the right to destroy her daughter's life. My mother's core trauma stemmed from my father leaving her, citing her history of severe aggression. She rationalized her subsequent behavior by claiming that my relationships reminded her of her youth and made her feel wanted again. This meant every dating interest I brought home became her target. She systematically manipulated and engaged in inappropriate relationships with my partners, driving them away, using emotional guilt to justify her actions. She would tell me things like, "You're too young to understand what real love is. I'm just helping you see the truth." But the truth was, she was the one creating the chaos. She'd flirt with my boyfriends, create drama out of thin air, and then play the victim when I confronted her. She'd say things like, "I'm only trying to protect you. Don't you see how much he reminds me of your father? I can't go through that again." It was a constant cycle of sabotage, always framed as her own pain. I felt trapped, like my happiness was a direct threat to hers. Each ruined relationship was another piece of evidence that my life was not my own. I was just a character in her never-ending drama, and she was the only one allowed a happy ending. After years of being ignored by authorities who minimized her actions, I realized I couldn't beat her manipulation with honesty. They'd say things like, "It's a family matter," or, "She's your mother, she probably means well." I knew then that playing by the normal rules wouldn't work. I had to create my own. I chose to wait until I was an adult, when I'd have legal standing and more control. That's when I discovered her therapist, a man who seemed more like a confidant than a professional. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me during brief encounters, it was all wrong. He was displaying unprofessional attention toward me, and I realized my mother was using him to validate her twisted victim narrative. So my long-term plan began. I booked a session with him under a false name. In that session, I created a story for myself, feeding him information that mirrored my mother's case almost exactly. I talked about a fictional difficult daughter, about my own supposed past traumas, all while I was secretly documenting everything. I noted his leading questions, his lack of professional boundaries, and his eagerness to agree with my fabricated story. I was collecting evidence, not just against my mother, but against the very person who was enabling her abuse. Every session was a calculated move, a piece of a puzzle that I was slowly assembling. I was no longer a victim waiting for help, I was building the case that would finally set me free. My mother sensed I was pulling away and escalated her monitoring. It was like she had a sixth sense for my independence. Suddenly, my phone would die faster, and strange apps would appear. She had installed a tracking application on my phone. She knew where I was, who I was with, everything. The suffocation was getting worse. Then came her big move. She attempted a family session with the therapist. Her goal was to use him as her ultimate weapon, to have a professional officially declare that I was the one with delusions, and that she was the long-suffering mother. But this was the trap I had been waiting for. The session backfired spectacularly. Because I had already established a confidential relationship with him under my fake identity, her attempt to triangulate us revealed his complete lack of professional boundaries. He was caught. The confrontation at home that night became physical. She cornered me, screaming that I had ruined everything. When I tried to leave, she grabbed me, leaving visible bruising on my arm. This was the final, undeniable piece of evidence. It corroborated my father's earlier claims of her aggression, the claims everyone had dismissed for years. I immediately went to an urgent care clinic, not just for the injury, but to get it documented. I now had a crucial paper trail. Armed with documentation of her physical aggression, the therapist's now suspended license, and the mountain of evidence I'd gathered about their conspiracy to manipulate vulnerable clients, I finally contacted my father. I hadn't spoken to him in years, a distance my mother had carefully engineered. But when I reached out, I learned he had never given up. He had already hired a private investigator and had been waiting, patiently, until I was legally an adult to intervene without my mother being able to legally block him. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place. My father listened to my story, looked at my evidence, and shared his own. It was a flood of validation. My mother's actions and the therapist's illegal practice weren't just isolated events. They were a coordinated pattern of exploitation. We discovered he was an unlicensed healer who preyed on women, and my mother was his accomplice, feeding him new victims. My father provided the final legal resources we needed. With our combined evidence, the case was airtight. The investigation led to the conviction of both my mother and the unlicensed therapist for their collective actions against me and multiple other women. I finally escaped the cycle of abuse and deceit. I didn't get revenge, I got justice. Justice for myself and for the other victims who were harmed by her and her associate. I rebuilt my life, reconnected with my father, and finally found my own voice. Was my extreme action justified to break a multi-generational cycle of manipulation and pain? The moral verdict is yours. The verdict zone is open. Hit the subscribe button and click the link below to our forum to cast your vote and join the debate. Does family loyalty have a limit when safety is at stake? Check out more stories like this on the Verdict Zone channel. Your story may be the next.